Claire Thompson, a 35-year-old woman, lived in a marriage that, to others, seemed like a fairy tale. Married to Marcus Richards, a successful 38-year-old businessman, she enjoyed a materially comfortable life. They lived in a beautiful house on the outskirts of Seattle, attended the best social events, and were seen as the perfect couple by friends and acquaintances. However, behind closed doors, the reality was quite different.
The marriage, which had once been full of promises, had turned into a cold and distant relationship.
Marcus was always busy, dividing his attention between endless meetings and business trips. He believed that providing a life of luxury was enough to keep Claire happy, but she longed for something money couldn't buy: attention, affection, and the emotional connection that had vanished over time. Tired of spending her days alone and without purpose, Claire decided to occupy her time with something new. A friend suggested she enroll in a renowned gym in the city, and Claire, initially hesitant, eventually agreed. The idea of having a different routine and, perhaps, feeling more active and confident seemed appealing. This is how Claire met Gavin Bennett, a 32-year-old fitness instructor. Gavin was the opposite of Marcus: charismatic, attentive, and full of energy. From their first meeting, he made her feel something she hadn't felt in years: seen and appreciated.
During classes, he offered detailed guidance and encouraged her, always with a warm smile.
At first, Claire thought of it all as professional courtesy. However, as the weeks went by, she noticed that Gavin always made an effort to maintain prolonged eye contact and that his compliments went beyond her performance at the gym. "You're doing really well, Claire. It's inspiring to see how dedicated you are," he said one day, making her blush. Claire felt a spark she had long forgotten. Those subtle compliments, Gavin's kind gestures, and his attention began to stir something inside her. She felt alive, desired, and as much as she fought against what she was feeling, the idea of going back home to face the emotional emptiness was suffocating. That same day, during dinner with Marcus, she tried to start a conversation about her time at the gym. But, as usual, he responded with monosyllables, looking more at his phone than at her. "That's nice, Claire," he said without even lifting his eyes. Disheartened once again, she realized that this marriage was like a sandcastle, beautiful on the outside but on the verge of collapsing. The days at the gym had become the best part of Claire's routine. Each session with Gavin seemed to awaken something new in her, a sense of vitality she hadn't felt in years. Although she tried to convince herself that everything was innocent, his attention and compliments made her heart race. At first, she tried to brush it off, but it was impossible to ignore the growing chemistry between them. One morning, Gavin suggested that Claire try a private session to improve her posture during exercises. She hesitated but eventually agreed. During the session, their proximity became inevitable. Gavin, while helping her adjust her position, placed his hand on her shoulder, a touch that seemed to carry more than just professionalism. "You're improving quickly, Claire. It's amazing to see how dedicated you are. Not many people have this kind of discipline," he said, looking directly into her eyes. Claire felt her face flush and looked away, but Gavin's smile lingered. After the session, Gavin invited her for coffee at a nearby cafe. Claire knew she should decline, but the idea of spending more time with him was too tempting. During their conversation, they laughed, shared confidences, and realized they had more in common than they had imagined. Claire spoke about her abandoned dreams, her frustrations, and the emptiness she felt at home. Gavin, in turn, talked about his passion for his work and how he always sought to inspire people to be their best. "You deserve more than this, Claire. You're an amazing woman," he said, lightly touching her hand on the table. That gesture, so simple yet so full of meaning, broke something inside her. That night, when she returned home, Claire couldn't get Gavin out of her mind. While Marcus was on yet another business call, she found herself thinking about Gavin's smile, the touch of his hands, and how he always made a point of listening to her. For the first time in a long time, Claire felt alive. The following week, Gavin took advantage of a private moment in the gym studio to express his feelings. "Claire, I know this is wrong, but I can't stop thinking about you." His words caught her by surprise, but she knew she felt the same. Unable to resist their mutual attraction, Claire and Gavin shared a kiss. It was an overwhelming moment, but one laden with guilt. Claire knew she was crossing a dangerous line, but at that moment, all that mattered was the intensity of what she felt. After the kiss, Claire was overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. There was passion, yes, but also an unbearable guilt that followed her like a shadow. She began avoiding her usual encounters with Gavin at the gym, fearing that someone might suspect something. However, the distance only seemed to intensify the desire she felt for him. Gavin, on the other hand, couldn't hide his feelings. He sought her out discreetly, sent messages asking how she was, and left notes at the gym's reception. "I'm thinking of you," one of them read, stirring a whirlwind of emotions in Claire that she tried desperately to control. That same week, Claire was caught off guard by an unexpected visit. Her younger sister, Valerie, showed up at her house. Valerie, 28, was the opposite of Claire, outgoing, ambitious, and always ready to steal the spotlight wherever she went. Although the two had a seemingly friendly relationship, there was always an unspoken tension between them, marked by old rivalries and silent resentments. "I came to spend a few days with you. Hope you don't mind, sis," Valerie said with a smile that seemed to hide ulterior motives. Claire, though surprised, welcomed her, trying to ignore the feeling that something lay behind her sister's unannounced visit. In the following days, Valerie seemed interested in every detail of Claire's life. She asked about Marcus, her gym routine, and even commented on how different Claire seemed, more alive. "Are you hiding something from me, Claire?" she joked, but her tone left Claire feeling uneasy. Meanwhile, Gavin kept insisting on seeing her. One afternoon, when Claire finally gave in and met him at a secluded park, Valerie secretly followed her, watching everything from a distance. The prolonged embrace between Claire and Gavin, followed by their intense gazes, was enough to awaken Valerie's competitive instincts. Later, Valerie subtly confronted Claire. "You're living some kind of secret, aren't you? I always knew you weren't as perfect as everyone thought," she said in a tone that sounded both teasing and threatening. Claire denied everything, but Valerie's enigmatic smile made it clear that she knew more than she was letting on. Claire spent that night wide awake, tormented not only by the guilt of betraying Marcus but also by the possibility that Valerie was scheming something. Her sister's presence in her home no longer seemed coincidental, and Claire began to wonder how far Valerie might go to harm her. The following days were a whirlwind for Claire. Valerie's constant presence in her home was starting to wear on her. Every comment, every curious glance, seemed to have a hidden agenda, and Claire knew her sister wasn't just there for a casual visit. She began to feel cornered, fearing that her secrets would be exposed. Gavin, on the other hand, showed no signs of slowing down. He was more present than ever, with messages and discreet meetings. The attraction between them seemed to grow every day, and although Claire tried to resist, it was as if she couldn't control the impulse to be close to him. One particularly tense night, while Marcus was away on a business trip, Valerie decided to confront Claire once and for all. When they were alone in the kitchen, Valerie, with a cryptic smile, spoke directly. "I know what's going on, Claire. I saw you with him, with Gavin, and I know you're lying to everyone around you." Claire froze. Shock took over her body, and for a moment, she didn't know how to react. How had Valerie found out? She felt vulnerable and fragile, but at the same time, a part of her knew the moment of truth had arrived. "You think I didn't know? I've always been paying attention. I've always known something was off between you and Marcus. But now, I see that you were just waiting for the right moment to take that step, weren't you?" Valerie said with unsettling confidence. Claire tried to deny it, but her sister's words carried an unrelenting tone. "It's not what you think, Valerie. It was confused, but it's not what you imagine." Valerie laughed, a low, cold laugh. "I know you think you're doing this because of Marcus, but really, you're doing this because it's what you've always wanted. I know you want to be desired, that you need something more. And I know Gavin has what you need." Those words cut Claire like knives. It was true, she wanted to be desired. She felt alive when she was with Gavin, but she had never admitted that to herself. Valerie seemed to know her deepest thoughts, her fears, and desires. And worst of all, she was using it against her. "I won't let this slide, Claire. You'll see, everything will be exposed." "You can't hide anymore," Valerie said before walking out of the kitchen, leaving Claire alone with her thoughts and the weight of a secret now at risk of being revealed. Claire stood there, stunned. She felt a mixture of anger and fear. Anger that Valerie was using her vulnerability against her, but also fear of how this revelation could destroy everything she had built so far. What would she do? How could she escape this trap without losing everything? Claire didn't know how much longer she could keep her truth hidden. She felt like she was walking on a tightrope, trying to balance her life before everything came crashing down. She could no longer bear the weight of the guilt and the lies. Her life had become a chaotic blend of betrayal and fear, and the pressure of keeping it all a secret was becoming unbearable. The morning after her confrontation with Valerie, Claire was surprised by Marcus, who had returned early from his business trip.
He was excited, bringing gifts and a smile on his face, unaware that Claire's world was about to collapse. "I knew you'd miss me. How was your week?"
Marcus asked, trying to show affection. But Claire's smile was forced. She could no longer look at him the same way, and the feelings she once had for him were fading. She knew the moment of telling the truth was approaching, but she feared how Marcus would react. Her husband had always been overly attached, demanding, and now he seemed more emotionally distant. But Claire's biggest concern was the look of disappointment he might have when he discovered the betrayal. She led him to the couch and, with no strength to speak, looked at him with a vacant expression. Marcus noticed something was wrong. "Claire, what happened? You seem distant. What's going on with us?" Marcus asked, concerned, sitting beside her. I did something I can't hide anymore, Marcus," Claire finally said, her voice trembling. I cheated on you." The words felt like a blow, and the air seemed to leave the room. Marcus looked at her, stunned, unable to believe what he had just heard. His face shifted from perplexed to angry, pain reflecting in his eyes. "You cheated on me? With who?" Marcus's voice was low but filled with repressed fury. "With Gavin, the gym instructor. I don't know how it happened, but I let it happen. I couldn't resist. I'm so sorry." Claire felt a weight on her chest, as if the world was collapsing around her. Marcus remained silent for a long moment, processing what he had just heard. Then he suddenly stood up, walking away from her. His eyes were full of pain, and Claire felt the growing distance between them. She watched him walk toward the door, his anguish making it clear that he needed time to process the revelation. I don't know what to do with this, Claire," Marcus said, his voice trembling with anger and sadness. "I never thought you'd do this to me." Claire felt devastated. Every word Marcus spoke seemed to pierce her heart. He was leaving, but before he walked out, he turned and, with an empty look, said, "I need time. I can't stay here right now." The door slammed behind him with a bang. Claire sat on the couch, her head in her hands. She was lost, not knowing what to do. Claire spent her days trying to cope with Marcus's absence and the pain caused by the revelation of her betrayal. Although she had distanced herself from Gavin for a moment, she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the desire and attraction that still consumed her. But Claire's biggest concern wasn't just a relationship with Marcus or her own feelings, it was what Valerie would do next. Valerie, with her cold, calculating smile, had become a constant presence in Claire's life, even though she seemed to be distancing herself. Now that she knew about the affair, there was something about Valerie that Claire couldn't ignore. Her sister was clearly waiting for the right moment to make her next move. One afternoon, while Claire was home alone, she received a message from Valerie. "We need to talk. I know what you're going through, and I know what you did, but you're underestimating me. Are you ready to face the consequences?" The message was brief, but clear enough for Claire to understand that her sister was manipulating the situation for her own purposes. Valerie wasn't there to comfort her, but to make sure she suffered. Claire, who had once felt lost, now knew that her sister had an agenda. She replied to the message, "What do you want from me, Valerie?" Valerie responded quickly, "I just want to see how far you'll go to keep everything hidden. If you really love your husband, you'll need more than just words to fix this. I know what you did with Gavin. I saw you two together." Claire felt her stomach churn. Valerie knew too much, and that meant she was just getting started with tormenting her sister. Time passed, and Claire realized that the pressure from Valerie was growing. It wasn't enough that Valerie had exposed Claire's secret to her. Valerie wanted more. She wanted to destroy her. Claire knew her sister was waiting for the right moment to reveal everything to Marcus, to make sure the affair was fully exposed, but she also knew that would mean the end of her marriage and probably the end of her life as she knew it. One night, while Claire was at home, there was a knock on the door. When she opened it, she saw Valerie standing there, with a malicious smile. "You really thought you could escape this, Claire? I know what you did. Don't kid yourself. I'm not like you. I have control over everything now." Claire didn't know what to say. She could feel the pressure building with every word Valerie spoke, and she knew her sister was playing a dangerous game, a game that could end her once and for all.
I'm not your enemy, Valerie.
But you can't destroy me like this. I'm not the person you think I am anymore, Claire responded, her voice full of nervousness but also a new sense of strength. Valerie took a step forward, getting closer to Claire, her gaze cold.
I'm the only one with the power to end you.
And I'll enjoy every second of it. Claire felt the ground beneath her feet growing even more unstable. Her sister was fully involved in this revenge game and had no intention of stopping. Now, Claire was caught between a rock and a hard place, knowing her life was about to be exposed in every possible way. Claire didn't know what to do anymore. The pressure from Valerie was starting to affect everything around her. She no longer had a safe space, and she felt her life slowly crumbling down. The days dragged on, and the tension in the air was unbearable. She tried to maintain the facade that everything was fine, but inside, everything was falling apart. After Valerie's visit, Claire began to realize that her sister not only wanted revenge for the affair but was also willing to destroy everything Claire had, including her family. Valerie was becoming an even more real and dangerous threat, and Claire knew that at any moment, she could lose everything. The worst was yet to come. The next day, Marcus finally came home. The silence between them was heavy, the kind of silence that carried all the pain, lies, and uncertainties built up over the past days. Claire felt a growing fear as she saw Marcus walk through the door. He wasn't the same man she knew anymore, and the trust they once shared was now broken. He seemed distant, his eyes tired, as if he was trying to digest everything he had discovered. She knew that the moment to make the final move was approaching, but she didn't know how. She didn't know how to deal with the pain she herself had caused Marcus, let alone the weight of Valerie's threats, which now not only threatened to expose her affair but also reveal secrets Claire didn't even know were in plain sight.
Claire, we need to talk, Marcus finally said, his voice cold. He was calmer than she expected, but also more determined.
I know, Marcus. I know everything has changed, Claire replied, her voice trembling.
She felt the weight of every word, as if confessing a crime, as if there were no turning back.
Are you afraid of me, Claire? Marcus asked, his eyes analyzing her intently. She hesitated for a moment before finally answering. Yes.
I'm afraid, Marcus.
But what I fear most is losing you, is seeing what my sister is doing to me. Marcus looked at her for a few seconds before sighing and slowly moving closer. I still love you, Claire. But I can't be a fool. You did something unforgivable, and I need time to understand what this means for us. Claire felt a momentary relief upon hearing those words. He still loved her, or at least seemed to feel something for her, but she knew the situation was too complicated. Love wouldn't be enough to fix the damage she had caused. When she thought the conversation was calming down, Marcus's phone rang. He looked at the screen, and his expression instantly changed.
It was a message from Valerie. I know what you did, and now I'm going to show everything.
Prepare for the worst.
The phone fell from his hand, as if a bomb had gone off inside them.
The air in the room grew heavier, and Claire felt as though her entire world was collapsing.
Marcus looked at her with wide eyes, as if she were responsible for everything. What did you do, Claire?
What else are you hiding from me? Claire didn't know how to respond. She felt a deep chill in her stomach. Valerie had finally played her final card.
What more could be revealed? Claire was on the edge, and now everything she feared was about to become reality.
The days following the revelation of Valerie's message were a true nightmare for Claire.
Every moment seemed heavier than the last.
Marcus had become distant, his trust irreparably broken. He no longer wanted to talk to her, nor hear her explanations. Claire knew she was losing her husband, the love of her life, and a growing sense of desperation overtook her. Amid the emotional chaos she was living through, Claire received another message from Valerie. This time, it was a photo of Claire and Gavin, taken on that fateful afternoon at the hotel. Claire knew that Valerie didn't just have the power to destroy her life, but also to expose her in a cruel and public way. The worst part was knowing that there was nothing she could do to stop it. Now it's your turn to suffer, Claire. I've always known you were weak. You'll see how I know how to play this game. Claire felt her heart race as she read the message. Valerie's words echoed in her mind, like a death sentence. She knew that Valerie was playing dirty,
taking advantage of Claire's vulnerability to get revenge on her sister. But the worst part was that there was no way out. She tried to seek comfort in Gavin, but he too seemed distant. The guilt was too much for him, and he knew that, like Claire, he couldn't go back. He too was trapped in Valerie's ruthless game, which was determined to destroy everyone around her. Meanwhile, Marcus grew more withdrawn. Claire didn't know how to reignite the flame of love between them, especially after everything that had happened. She wanted to apologize, wanted to go back in time and prevent the affair from happening. But what tormented her the most was Marcus's silence. He wasn't accusing her directly, but he was pulling away, as if words were no longer enough to explain what he felt. Claire knew the moment was approaching. Valerie was ready to make her move, and worse, she was playing more aggressively. Claire didn't know how far her sister would go, but she had the sense that something even more devastating was about to happen. One rainy night, while Claire was walking through the house, the sound of a door slamming made her stop. She turned and saw Marcus standing in the doorway, with an empty look, as if he had already made his decision. He was no longer there to argue or hear her explanations. He had something much more serious in mind. "I'm leaving, Claire. I need some time. I don't know if I'll be able to forgive what you did, but I need space." Those words hit Claire like a bomb. The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. She wasn't just facing the possibility of losing Marcus. She was living it in real time. "Please don't do this. Don't leave me," Claire pleaded, tears starting to fall uncontrollably. She no longer cared about her appearance, her pride. She just wanted to save what was left of her marriage. But Marcus, with a hard and sad expression, shook his head. "I don't know, Claire. I really don't know." He turned and walked out the door, leaving Claire alone, lost in a whirlwind of emotions and with an uncertain future. She knew the next step would be even harder, and the weight of guilt only grew heavier. Valerie's game was about to reach its peak. The emptiness left by Marcus's departure became an unbearable weight for Claire. She felt lost, unsure of what to do or where to go. The house, once filled with life, now felt like a maze of painful memories. The echo of their words, the broken promises, everything seemed to haunt her. Valerie, her own sister, was destroying her life in ways Claire never imagined. And while Claire struggled to try to save what was left of her marriage, her sister was taking advantage of her vulnerability. What Claire didn't know was that Valerie was plotting another move, something even more cruel and ruthless. She already knew that, with Marcus's separation, Claire would be vulnerable, and now she wouldn't miss the opportunity to finish off what was left of her happiness. Valerie had made new alliances. Her power was growing, and she knew that by pushing Claire to her limits, she could finally destroy everything her sister had. One afternoon, Claire received a message from an unknown number. When she opened it, the surprise was even crueler than she imagined. The message contained a photo of Marcus, smiling and hugging an unfamiliar woman. The message read, "I warned you, Claire. Now you'll see that lies never last." Claire stared at the photo for a long time, her heart tightening. That image, which seemed innocent at first glance, meant much more. She knew Marcus wasn't with another woman, but the photo was enough to destroy the little she still believed in herself. Valerie had dealt another deadly blow. Claire knew she should confront Marcus and try to figure out what was going on, but she was exhausted. She was at rock bottom, too drained to keep fighting. At the same time, the fear of what Valerie might reveal next kept her from acting. She knew her sister was waiting for the right moment to land the final blow. In an attempt to calm her mind, Claire decided to take a walk through the nearby park. She needed some fresh air, away from the suffocating house and her own thoughts. As she walked, the tears began to fall. She felt abandoned by everyone. Marcus, Gavin, and even the world around her. Anger and frustration mixed with sadness, and Claire could barely distinguish her own feelings. It was then that she unexpectedly ran into Gavin. He was standing as though waiting for her. The unexpected encounter brought a mix of emotions to the surface. On one hand, Claire felt a desperate need to speak with him, to find some explanation for what had happened. On the other, she feared that their relationship was marked by the same distrust and mistakes that her marriage to Marcus had been. "Claire, I know you're going through a tough time," Gavin said, with a sincere look. "I truly feel sorry for everything that's happened. But I can't keep doing this. I can't be part of this anymore." Not after everything Valerie has done. Claire looked at him, unsure of what to say. She felt the pain in his words, but she also saw the fear and guilt in his eyes. They were both trapped in Valerie's claws, but Claire knew Gavin had already made the decision to walk away.
Gavin, you can't leave me now. I need you. I need someone I can trust, Claire begged, her voice filled with desperation. But Gavin, with a heavy sigh, slowly pulled away. I can't, Claire. I can't be part of this anymore. I don't want to be another pawn in Valerie's game. He walked away, leaving Claire alone once again, without answers and without direction. The only comfort left was the idea that, despite everything, she could still fight. But how could she fight something as ruthless as Valerie? She knew that somehow, everything would end in a final confrontation. Claire could no longer hide from the truth. Every step she took seemed to lead to a dead end. She was at rock bottom, surrounded by lies, betrayals, and most of all, by the shadow of Valerie. She knew the moment to confront her sister was approaching, but she didn't know how to do it without destroying what little was left of her life. Even so, she could no longer live under the constant pressure Valerie had created. It was then, on a cold and cloudy day, that Claire made a decision. She called Valerie and arranged a meeting. They needed to settle things once and for all. Claire knew this confrontation would not be easy, but she felt it was the only way to end the nightmare Valerie had created. The meeting was set for a secluded cafe in the city. Claire arrived first, her heart pounding in her chest, anxiety consuming her. She knew she was about to face one of the hardest moments of her life. When Valerie arrived, her sarcastic smile was the first sign that she was in control of the situation. She seemed calm, relaxed, as if she had everything planned. So, Claire, you finally decided to face reality? Valerie said with a mocking tone. I knew you wouldn't be able to live with this guilt for much longer. Claire looked at her, her eyes swollen from crying, but with a fierce determination. Enough! Valerie, I know you've been taking advantage of everything that's happened, but I'm not going to be your victim anymore. Valerie chuckled quietly. Victim? You're guilty, Claire. Not only for cheating on your husband, but for destroying my life too. Don't come to me with that talk of revenge, because I'm the one in control here. Claire felt a wave of anger run through her body. It was hard to deal with Valerie's words, but she knew she couldn't let herself be shaken. I made a mistake, yes, and I'm paying for it. But you're not going to destroy what's left of me. No matter what you have in mind, you can't control my life anymore. Valerie looked at her with a look of disdain. You've always been weak, Claire. Always the poor little victim. And that's what's going to destroy you in the end. With that, she stood up, turning her back on Claire as if she had already won. But Claire didn't stay still. On impulse, she stood up and grabbed Valerie by the arm. Don't think you're getting away with it this time, Claire said, her teeth clenched. I'm going to fight for everything I have left. Valerie turned around, surprised by Claire's attitude. The two were face to face, each carrying their own emotions and scars. The confrontation had finally arrived. The tension in the air was almost unbearable as the two sisters stood face to face, both knowing that this moment would change everything. Claire's heart raced as she held Valerie's arm, the force of her grip a physical representation of the desperation she felt. Valerie, however, seemed unfazed, her eyes cold and calculating. She had always been the puppet master, the one who controlled the strings, and Claire knew she had to be prepared for anything. You think you can stand up to me now? Valerie sneered, twisting her arm from Claire's grip. You've always been weak, Claire, and you'll always be nothing more than my little sister, trying to play in a world you don't belong to. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The venom in Valerie's words cut deeper than anything she had ever heard before. But there was no turning back now. She couldn't let Valerie win. She couldn't let her sister destroy the last of her dignity. No, Valerie, Claire said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. I'm not weak. I've made mistakes, yes, but I've learned from them. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. Valerie's eyes flickered with a brief flash of anger, but it was gone just as quickly as it had come. She smiled, a cruel smile that made Claire's blood run cold. You really think you can take control now? Valerie taunted. You think you can fix everything? You're too late, Claire. Everything has already been set into motion, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Claire's stomach dropped. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the words piercing her like daggers. What did Valerie mean by that? What was she planning? She tried to push down the fear rising inside her, but it was impossible to ignore. "What are you talking about?" Claire demanded, her voice rising with a mix of frustration and fear. "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about," Valerie replied, her smile widening. "I've been planning this for a long time, Claire. You thought I was just playing games, didn't you? But I've been setting the stage for your destruction. And now, everything is falling into place." Claire's mind raced as she tried to piece together what Valerie was saying. She couldn't let her sister win. She couldn't let Valerie destroy her, but the thought of what Valerie could be planning made Claire's blood run cold. "I won't let you get away with this," Claire said, her voice shaking but determined. "Whatever it is you're planning, I will stop you." Valerie's laugh echoed through the room, cold and mocking. "You're too late, Claire. I already won. Marcus is mine now. He's been mine for months. Everything I did, everything I said, it was all part of the plan." Claire's heart stopped. The words hit her like a freight train, each one more devastating than the last. Marcus had been with Valerie all this time? How had she not known? How had she been so blind? Valerie continued, her voice dripping with triumph. "I made sure you were too distracted, too caught up in your own misery to see it coming. But Marcus was never really yours, Claire. He was always mine. And now, he's going to pay for what he did to me." The words cut deeper than anything Claire had ever felt before. She had never imagined that Valerie, her own sister, would go this far. But now she knew the truth. Valerie hadn't just betrayed her. She had orchestrated every single moment of her downfall. Claire staggered back, the weight of Valerie's betrayal sinking in. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She had trusted Marcus. She had trusted Valerie. And now they had both turned against her. She had nothing left. But then, something shifted inside her. A new resolve began to grow in the pit of her stomach. She wasn't going to let this be the end. She wasn't going to let Valerie win. Not now, not ever. Claire's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The weight of Valerie's betrayal hit her hard, but it was the revelation that Marcus had been part of her sister's cruel game that pushed her to the brink. She had given him her trust, her love, and in return, he had turned his back on her for Valerie. The pain was unbearable, yet in that moment, Claire realized something powerful. She couldn't let this be the end. She had to reclaim her life, no matter what it cost. Valerie's smug expression never faltered as she watched Claire struggle with the truth. "You're pathetic," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "I knew you'd fall apart, but honestly, I thought you'd at least put up more of a fight." Claire stood tall, her hands shaking at her sides, but her resolve was unshakable. "I won't let you get away with this," she said firmly, her voice stronger than she had ever thought possible. "You might think you've won, but you haven't. Not yet." Valerie's laughter rang through the air, sharp and derisive. "Oh, really? You think you can still win, after everything I've done to you? You're too late, Claire. You've lost everything. Marcus, your reputation, your dignity. It's all gone. And now you're nothing." The words stung, but Claire refused to let them break her. She had lost a lot, yes, but she wasn't going to lose herself. Not to Valerie, not to Marcus, and certainly not to the life they had tried to force her into. "Maybe I've lost some things," Claire said, her eyes blazing with determination, "but I still have my strength. And that's something you can never take away from me." The confrontation between the two sisters reached its peak as Valerie took a step toward Claire, her eyes narrowing. "You're nothing but a fool, Claire. You've always been the weak one, the one who needed someone to hold her hand. You never had the courage to stand up for yourself, and that's why you're here. You're nothing." Claire's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. This wasn't just about Marcus, or even Valerie. It was about taking control of her own life again, about proving to herself that she was capable of standing tall, no matter the circumstances. With a steady breath, Claire looked Valerie in the eye and said, "I'm not afraid of you anymore. You can take everything from me, but you will never take my power. And I will fight, every step of the way, to get back what's mine." Valerie stepped back, the mocking smile slowly fading from her face as the weight of Claire's words settled in. She had expected Claire to crumble, to fall apart, but instead,
Her sister was standing stronger than ever before. Valerie had underestimated Claire, and now, she was beginning to realize it. "I've been playing your game long enough," Claire continued, her voice steady and clear. "And I'm done. I'm done being your victim. You can have Marcus. You can have everything you think you've won, but you'll never have me." The finality in Claire's voice left no room for doubt. Valerie was losing her grip, and Claire was taking control, one word at a time. In that moment, something shifted between the two sisters. Valerie, once the puppet master, now found herself at a loss for words. Claire had stopped running, stopped hiding, and she was no longer afraid. Valerie had destroyed a lot, but she hadn't destroyed Claire. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Valerie's eyes flickered with uncertainty for the first time, and Claire could see the cracks in her sister's facade. The game was over. Claire had won, not by defeating Valerie physically, but by refusing to be broken. As Claire walked away, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had taken the final step in reclaiming her life, her strength, and her peace of mind. Valerie had tried to destroy her, but in the end, Claire had emerged victorious, not because of anything she had done to Valerie, but because she had learned to reclaim her own power. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel and press the like button. Thank you.